I got to be honest with you, Revelation can be intimidating sometimes. It's a book with a lot of imagery and a lot of things that are really hard to kind of figure out. Plus, you've got a whole bunch of different people who have different ideas of what the different things that we see in Revelation actually mean, what they're pointing to, and how to interpret them. So it's kind of a crazy book and yet really exciting and intriguing all at the same time. If you've been kind of stymied by the mystery of Revelation, then I encourage you to listen into this conversation. Rob finally broke me down, and I agreed to go ahead and dive into Revelation. So we kind of, in this particular episode, do a little bit of an intro into the book of Revelation, who it was written to, who it was written by, what is the book for, and how should we kind of receive it? What should we do with it? What do we do with the information that we see in the book of Revelation? So I want to start by saying this is a really tough topic to talk about. And so a lot of what I share and what we kind of discuss are our opinions. And that's okay. But just know that I'm not a Bible scholar by any stretch. But these insights may be intriguing to you. And I hope that they provide kind of a good sort of introduction to a very deep and wide concept, the book of Revelation in the Bible. So without further ado, this is my conversation with Rob Byrd and Amanda Jones as we kind of unpack the mysterious book of Revelation in the Bible.
Welcome to All the Things They Don't Want You to Talk About podcast. This podcast will explore all the subjects that make the insecure squirm in their seats. Religion, politics, local and national, the Constitution of the United States, and the wheel of love and hate, to just name a few. Stay with us as we use our freedom of speech to delve into the good and the bad. If this podcast is not for you, feel free to find another one. Without any further ado, here comes All the Things They Don't Want You to Talk About podcast. All right, welcome to another edition of All the Things They Don't Want You to Talk About podcast. TabooTalkback.com is the website where you can find other ones, and we've had a few real nice ones here as of late, so certainly go check them out. Amanda Jones, good day to you.
Good day, Robert.
Yes, and I always want to say special guest, but you're always special and a guest, and you're here for all these conversations. So good day to you, Mylan Bittenbender.
Well, thank you to my special host, Rob.
special Ed host, Rob. I get that. We talked about Ed the other day on the radio show, but the other one, the one that is not so much fun. All right, so this is going to be kind of an interesting little talk here because we want to talk a little bit about the last book of the Bible. And when
Rob wants to talk,
I want to talk about that. And we're just kind of overviewing what it's about, because I think we want to, as time goes on, we want to take a little deeper dives into it. I want to do it a little bit different, where I'm going to actually read a chapter and then we come and talk about it. And I can actually come in more informed rather than knowing nothing. Excuse me. So as we talk about this, before we started, I was talking to Mylan, because what we talk about, we say right here almost an everyday kind of saying, where everything begins, there's always an ending. And Genesis is the beginning and Revelations is the end of the Bible. And kind of what the philosophical question I ask is, does the end start on day one? Because if we all know there's an ending to the beginning of when the story begins, well, we know there's an ending. Does it start then, or did the end start much, much later?
That is philosophical.
So I start with. So I say we don't want to go too deep, and I start with probably the deepest question.
It's pretty early for that deep a question.
Well, let's take just a second then, and just look at the word revelation, right?
Yeah.
Name of the book.
Yes.
The book is a revelation, which is means God is revealing something to us through a person, through John. John was the writer. John was the last of the apostles. The rest had been killed off. They'd been martyred for the faith, and John was actually on an island, like a prison island. He was exiled to the island of Patmos, and while he's there, the book opens with him kind of explaining what happened. He heard a voice behind him, and the voice was like a trumpet, calling out to him. So, I mean, imagine that you're kind of all alone, and then all of a sudden, this voice comes out of nowhere, and it's like a trumpet. Freak out, right?
Sure.
So what happens? What John begins to write down?
Now, but not to. I don't want to really interrupt you there because I love this thought, but it's kind of funny that there are you hear of stories around the world where people are just hearing trumpets, and they're hearing some kind of a bellowing, instrument like that. And it's like, where is this coming from? They have no idea where it's coming from.
And the book of Revelation, there's several places where there are trumpets. Yeah, I mean, it's a thing. Yeah, you're right. Absolutely. I'm glad you brought that up. So the word revelation means that God is revealing something, and it's almost like, in the Wizard of Oz when Dorothy gets a look behind the curtain, and it's like, oh man, it's just a guy back there with a big Well, this is kind of the opposite direction, but the same idea, in that God, it's almost like God is kind of pulling back the curtain of reality and allowing John to see beyond this present darkness, this present age, this present sphere, of life and reality, and allowing him to see what's beyond. So instead of just seeing and feeling and experiencing the physical realm, he sees beyond into the spiritual realm, and that's kind of what the revelation is. So to answer your question, right, did the beginning start with the end and the end with the beginning, and blah, blah, blah. Eternity, the spiritual realm has been around forever. But at some point, God chose to create, and that's where we get Genesis, right? So the beginning as we know it began in Genesis, but that wasn't the beginning. The spirit realm has just always been, and God chose to create this time and space, a universe in time and space, and put us in it. So it's almost like we're inside of this other realm. The spiritual realm is all around us, and inside of that is this physical universe that God created.
It almost kind of makes you think like Men in Black, the movie where at the end they showed, you're actually just in a little marble, and there's a million little marbles out there, and we're just this one test subject, or something to that effect. Yeah,
that would be a revelation, through the eyes of Men in Black philosophy, but yeah, so John is getting a look behind the curtain, kind of.
I have to ask about John. There were all the disciples, and wherever there's a group of people, and it's people that are doing God's word, or whether it's business or whatever it is, there's always a pecking order. Was John considered to be the number one disciple?
So there's the pecking order has, different kind of parameters, right? There's the number one, and then there's the closest two, and John was the closest two. So John would have been the guy that was kind of like Jesus' best friend, but Peter would have been number one as far as kind of the leader that Jesus put out there, right?
Kind of the leader of the disciples was Peter.
Yeah, but
John
kind of
was
took the lead role
more.
John, John would have been kind of like his confidant.
Yeah. All right. Okay, so they hear trumpets, and that wakes him up or catches his attention, and that's where we kind of start, where God communicates with John about how all this ends.
Yeah, it's not just about how all this ends, but again, if you're looking behind the curtain from the physical realm into the spiritual realm, this is where Revelation can get really confusing, because it's like, is this in the future? Is it referring to something that's now? Is it referring to something past?
Right.
It might be referring to all three at once, and which kind of blows our minds. People think that the Bible is some kind of, idiot book for simpletons. And really, if you look behind it, you find
actually, I have to ask who thinks that, because it is not a. I've read some of the Bible. But no matter what you're reading in it, it is not a simple read, because a lot is there that you have to interpret.
Well, I've listened to a lot of John Lennox. That's a name that I couldn't remember several weeks ago when we did the podcast. Brilliant scientist, actually mathematician. He's done several debates with some of the new atheists, and that's one of the things he continually runs into is they treat him like he's, an idiot for believing what he believes and that the Bible is full of fairy tales and silly stuff, and whatever. So there's definitely a strong current of especially in the kind of atheist realm, that the Bible is just.
And I will have to say, it is sometimes easy to see it that way. They're just a bunch of fanciful stories.
Well, no, I agree with Mylan. Like, there's a lot of the hyper intellectuals.
Sure, yeah,
that'll come and they'll cherry pick. What they want to make their argument more valid. And they do love to say the words like, oh, it's a fairy tale. And, make you feel like you're inferior almost for, I guess, believing in a fairy tale.
Right. And I get it. What's interesting is a lot of times they've never actually studied the Bible. Like you said, they've just cherry picked certain things, or maybe they haven't even read it at all. A lot of times they don't really have a clue what's in there, and they just kind of have, come to that conclusion for whatever reason.
And I don't know if we talked about this on one of the on the podcasts or not, but there was a scripture about God was saying you can use the scriptures for good and for evil. So,
yeah, and we see that. Yeah, you have to look at the whole picture. I mean, you can go back to Deuteronomy and you can find some verses that make God look like an absolute monster, and a lot of people do.
Right, and that's a lot of the arguments too. Why would an all-loving God do these things to children? Why would
say these
happen?
things? Yeah, and really, so much of that is wrapped up in context. Yeah. And it takes an understanding of the bigger picture.
Yeah. And well, when we start kind of thinking about the revelations is, I'm 53 years old, and all my life, or probably when I first started really hearing about it is, junior high, high school, and people start talking about signs from Revelations and almost a mystical type thing. But then, in 1987 or 8, maybe it's the year I graduated, I can't quite remember, with Gorbachev when the wall fell. But they used to always talk about, because of that birthmark he had on his head, he was one of the 4 horsemen that were coming back. So, could end times, as Revelations goes, can that span like a huge length of time, or is Revelations kind of it starts today and it ends a week from now?
Yeah, that's the thing that we don't know. There are some references to time. And again, even the people that say, well, this is how it's all going to happen, they have to do a certain amount of kind of their own, like they have to buy into some certain interpretations, because the book is full of imagery and the kinds of ways that we're like going, we don't know what this, and the truth is we don't really know what it means. That's the thing. So I'm always, when people challenge me, because some people will say, well, this is what you're supposed to believe, because in Revelation it says this and this and this and this. I can go, yeah, but over here it says this. And these aren't contradictory. But if you're looking at a realm that we can't understand, it's very likely that it's, when you look at the different dimensions of something, you can come to some wildly different conclusions about the same thing.
Yeah,
right?
No doubt.
And so
it's the same thing. I don't know if we talked about it on the podcast, but we've talked about it. Certainly, I think on the radio show, it's the same kind of concept with eyewitnesses as at an accident.
Yeah,
maybe we talked about it before.
Yeah.
Each one sees everything a little bit different, whether it's the color or who entered the intersection first, who didn't stop. There's always some differences, but there's really only one way it happened.
Right.
But yet everybody, if you ask 5 people, are all going to perceive it a little bit differently.
And because this is giving us a look, I will say very clearly, this is my understanding, that because we're getting a look into a realm that we can barely comprehend, if at all, I hold on to the stuff from Revelation very loosely in the sense that I don't put a lot of confidence in my concrete understanding of what I'm reading. Yeah. So it's more of a kind of a look to expand my mind. Now, there are other scriptures, right? Jesus is teaching maybe the Sermon on the Mount or something like that. He says what he says, and I'm like going, I get it. I know exactly what he's talking about. Now I just have to decide if I'm actually going to, follow it.
Right.
when it comes to Revelation, I think that there's a lot of mystery woven into that. And I think we make a lot of big mistakes when we say, this is what that means. So for me personally, I read it going, okay, I know I've got some clues and I've got some hints about what's, quote unquote, behind the curtain. When the times come, what I need to know and understand I'll be prepared for that. It'll be clearer to me. But for me to say, this is what's going to happen and how it's going to happen, I think it's a huge step for me. Maybe some other people have it figured out. I surely don't.
Well, I don't think there's any book in the Bible that's actually been totally figured out.
No. And you know what? For a lot of people, that's a big struggle. They don't want to believe in a God they can't see, feel, touch, smell, understand, figure out. And I'm like going, I kind of don't want to believe in a God that I can.
Yeah.
Right? Because if I can wrap my head around him, he's not very big.
Sure. Well, but faith is faith in something that isn't there or that you can't see or haven't communicated with. We are tactile human beings. We buy on what we touch and like and how it feels to us. So the fact that you can't see him and then you have to have faith that he's there and a part of your life, I can see where, I certainly have had that struggle in my life.
Sure. Yeah.
And I still struggle with it.
Yeah.
To every day is why when you watch all these bad things happen, when you watch 2 hurricanes kill these people and rip their livelihoods away, their property. Now and then that's one of the things when you think about, that's part of, I think, kind of Revelations. They talk about weather and turbulent weather and this, all that. Are we leading up to it? Or is this our natural cycles of our earth? Or is it just something that we can play political games with? It's got to be one of those.
I think it depends on if you believe it's a God. Weather create, you know what I mean? It's if you believe God's the one that created this weather or if it's man-made weather, like that takes you down a whole bunch of rabbit holes there.
You're looking into some
man-made weather as far as global warming or climate change. I don't know. That's a whole different discussion. Now we have talked before about, I think it's silver sulfide or silver something, which is something that they can inject in the atmosphere to induce weather. And I had a conversation with the ladies about, she was like a expert on, I don't want to talk about those things that are just conspiracies. Well, they're not conspiracies. It was actually used in 2008 at the Beijing Olympic Games to try to divert bad weather away from the games. So you can't tell me that, and if they're doing it in 2008, that means that they probably already been doing it for a long time, especially when we talk about our government being 50 years to 75 years and technology ahead of us. That that we can't say that's true.
There's been weather manipulation for decades.
We've been trying to manipulate weather forever. We've been trying to figure out a way for men to grow more hair forever. And you're doing okay. I think you're doing all right. Not so much me, but when you look at Revelations and want to call it the end, and it seems like the end has been here forever, because as I look at this world, it just gets more and more confusing every day. And what the hell is really going on here? Mm-hmm. And it always kind of feels like that. And you always have people on one side that need kind of the religious side. This is God. And then there's the other side that says, this is man. We're destroying that. So I don't know. It's a hard one to slice. And I have read Revelations a long time ago. I read it, because that was probably the only book that I actually read the whole book of. But, 16, 17, I think, year old mind, maybe I'll have to tackle it with a 53-year-old mind.
Yeah. And that definitely will change your perspective. Sure. When you see, so much of what we read in Revelation is, like you mentioned, the weather, right?
Yeah.
The physical world and the things in the physical world, but even more so in powers and kingdoms and political structures and all that kind of stuff, and then there's the big bad Antichrist. Who is that? I thought, as a matter of fact, when you mentioned Gorbachev, I'd heard that he was the Antichrist, not one of the 4 horsemen or, whatever.
Okay.
And we've heard, how many people have been accused of being the Antichrist, right?
It could have been Hitler.
It could have,
he was
not necessarily
kind of an
he was definitely an Antichrist, right?
Yeah.
He had the spirit of Antichrist, right? But, and the big question is, is the Antichrist a political system, or is it an actual person, or is it a, the way of the world, or what is it? And there's so many different ways that could be interpreted. And I know that somebody's going to be listening to this going right now going, no, that's not the way it is. And I'm like, there's a lot of open ends to some of that stuff.
Yeah.
But, speaking of conspiracy theories, if you don't mind me spinning a little something,
I don't.
I honestly believe the Antichrist could, I'm not going to say he will, it will, whatever, could be a persona created with AI. We've got these deep fakes.
Mm-hmm.
We've got people that are already experiencing, they've met this person online. Yeah. There's an image, there's a video, there's a voice, there's all this stuff. And you find out it's not even a real human being. And you think about, the things that the Antichrist, according to Revelation, is able to do or accomplish. He's able to win the heart of the whole world, and become a leader that can literally rule the whole world. A persona created with AI.
Maybe that's Kamala Harris. And let me say this for a second. Hold on just a minute.
Okay.
And I say this because when you look at AI and you look at how it performs, it doesn't quite get there. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
When you hear AI voices talking, and
they sound kind of cackling.
They're not quite right. They kind of miss kind of the high ends. They sound a little more monotone than what a regular voice would sound like. And you look at AI graphics and video, they don't quite get the faces right. When you type something in, kids playing with crayons at school, and their faces are a little bit deformed. It's something not quite right, and that's kind of why I think maybe she's AI, because although she looks okay, she never quite gets to the point, never answers a question, and pulls a whole bunch of words in that don't really mean anything towards the question she was asked.
And she might evolve to a version of AI that's brilliant.
I doubt it. But it could. I mean, she's had a lot of opportunities, and now they even got to the point where now I think they're gonna cover her back up and not let her talk, because every time she talks, she either will.
I think it's because she's talking about things she does not understand.
Well, and she certainly doesn't, because I will have to say this, like they've been campaigning on changing the last 3-4 years.
Right.
And then when she goes on The View and they ask, what would you do different than what Joe Biden has done? Well, I really can't think of nothing. Right. I mean, he didn't make any mistakes. I'm like, okay, so how do you run on change over the last 3.5 years?
Right.
But no mistakes were made.
Oh, because we're still cleaning up the mess from 4 years ago. Come on, Rob. Get on board. Don't you know how politics works?
Oh, she's talking about, she's campaigning on the change from Donald Trump's 4 years.
Yes, we're all still screwed up because of that. Yeah, no, don't you know?
In COVID.
Okie dokie. So, well, they've done a really poor job of doing what they campaigned on. Yeah. Actually, that's what they said they were going to do, and they did it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Watch what they do, not what they say. But actually, they actually are really good at saying something in this effect, and then everybody's like, yeah, right, whatever. And then, that's what we've been doing the whole time with putting migrants in different swing states and all that kind of thing. So,
well, if you think of too, if it is AI, let's just kind of talk about this.
All right.
Like, sometimes when you're talking to people, they just repeat these talking points, and it's almost like you're talking to a bot.
Yeah.
So what if that is the way they kind of infiltrate everybody? And next thing we know, we are all technically AI bots.
Well, now we're getting into simulation theory.
Well, there's another podcast right now where they're talking about Trump being AI and the Antichrist. So.
Really? Well,
I'm just saying.
I guess we're going to have to choose one of them, unless we can finally see through that veil. But that veil, no matter what it is very dark and very hard to lift.
No, what about like actual possession? Like, I don't want like exorcist level, I guess, even. But if you can get to that level, it obviously could be a more calm level where you may not be able to tell, hey, this person's being possessed by something that's not themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and one of the things we have to understand about what Revelation tells us about the Antichrist is the Antichrist gets his power, quote unquote, power from a prophet, right? And so there's what appears to be a human being that to some degree, in some way, gives the Antichrist his power, helps him be this master world leader.
Is the Antichrist really just Satan then?
So there's the dragon. And again, we're not sure about all this, right? Mm-hmm. But the book of Revelation also talks about a dragon. I would say most scholars would say that the dragon is Satan. Mm-hmm. And Satan, the dragon is the one who's kind of behind all of this and involved in all of this. And so, yeah, absolutely. As a Christian, we definitely believe that there is an evil force. It's a personable evil force.
I certainly believe in evil. I think that's why, let's just say evil, or let's go with the devil. That's why they have been working so hard down there to bring on mental illness. Because with more and more people that are mentally ill, that is more and more places for the devil to hide.
Absolutely. Yeah, you've got your finger on a really important point. Yeah.
I read an article this morning that talked about how spirituality is like almost a cure for a lot of mental illness, because people will find the comfort and strength that they can get that full human experience almost from spirituality.
Yeah. Well, Jesus said the thief comes to steal, kill, and destroy, but I have come that they would have abundant life. And so it's almost as if, the other side is trying to suck the life out of us, and not just physical life, emotional life, mental life, all kinds of areas of our vitality.
Well, that's where they get their power.
And but Jesus wants us to be as thoroughly human as he created us to be in the design of God, when he said, "Let us create man in our own image." Jesus came to help us, to empower us to be thoroughly human. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And that's, that kind of goes with most of my beliefs growing up is, people would say there's a difference between medical technology and God. Well, isn't it God that put us on that path to learn this stuff? All things we have are because of him.
Yeah, everything we have, we're discovering. Part of that, I mentioned John Lennox a little bit ago. He's brilliant in the way that he brings things around to most of his argument. A lot of his argument is often that discovering what we are through science is really proving God, that there's an engineer, a designer behind this, intelligent design.
Well, every layer that's peeled leads to more questions.
And more layers.
You think you're going to get to it. You're like, okay, if this one's gone, finally, the answer is going to be right there in front of me. Yeah. And no matter what happens, no matter what we learn, the answer just keeps getting further and further away.
Yeah. The universe keeps growing. We're finally coming to the point where 14 billion years isn't near enough. This universe is showing that there was a beginning, and we've called it the Big Bang, and there's all kinds of theory now around where did that come from and how did it happen? And it's almost
14 billion years is an unfathomable number.
Oh yeah.
I mean, just go write $14 billion down. Yeah. And it's like, you really don't know how much money $14 billion is.
Elon does.
Well, he does, but no, and he probably don't. He just sees a number on a bank sheet.
That's true.
I've seen $2.5 million and $20 bills sitting on a table before when I worked for Ford Motor Company.
Really?
They brought me down there to show that compressed air leaks in the Livonia transmission plant where I was doing my internship. That's how much money they lose per year because of compressed air leaks. So we bet all the money on a table, and then I had armed guards in there with me, thinking I was going to try to steal their $2.5 million. I'm like, okay, yeah, I'll be able to get it out of here in my camera. But and then we take a stack off and then dissolve to that. So it just dissolves. Yeah. You see that money go $2.5 million.
Wow.
So that was a big table. I mean, that table was it was a full desk, probably 4 foot wide by 2.5 or whatever, stacked 4 foot high.
Yeah.
With $2.5 million in 20s. And it's like, wow, now think about $14 billion and how big and how much even if you made it in hundreds or $1,000 bills, that's going to be to take a huge room to house that money.
Yeah.
So it's kind of an unfathomable number. 14 billion years ago. Yeah, we draw pictures. Here's where the dinosaurs were here 14 billion years ago. But that's all we can do.
Yeah.
And it's if you can, there are maybe some minds big enough to comprehend how big 14 billion is.
Yeah.
Mine isn't, I don't think.
Yeah. Well, and what's equally mind blowing is the chances, right, that DNA could evolve. Actually dwarfs the 14 billion years. They're saying, there's no way. DNA is so incredibly complex that couldn't evolve, let alone all these different forms of it and all these different animals and plants and everything else. And
and our
it's just
Cro-Magnon man, our Neanderthal, that switch to what is now the human now, that they shown through that evolution that was very slow. Then all of a sudden at one point there was some kind of a change in the DNA and our forms became really what we know today.
Yeah. Well, there's so many loose ends in all of that. And, and I mean, we could postulate about that forever. Who knows where all of that came from? But I do know, like you said at the very beginning of this little rabbit trail, that every time we peel back a layer, we find out there's 8 more layers.
Yeah.
And you peel back those 8 more layers and there's 10 below each of those. And we
never ending onion blossom.
Yeah, we just keep going deeper and farther.
Onion.
The blooming onion. There you go.
And and we just keep getting farther and farther from a full grasp of what's really going on.
Yeah, that'd be a kind of a good name for a podcast. The blooming onion.
The blooming onion.
Yeah. It's So, how does Revelations end? How does the book end?
Well, the last couple chapters of the book are a revelation of what heaven, as we know it, will be. And there's some beautiful imagery in there. A lot of these ideas of streets of gold and gates of a single pearl and, that kind of stuff. There's almost this image that heaven is like a city. Yeah. But it's shaped like a cube. It talks about the 12 foundations, right? Which are kind of like 12 levels, if you could imagine a 12-story building. But each side of the cube is 1,200 miles. So like from here to Florida, right? Down one side, from here to Florida, down the other side, and then from here to Florida, up to the top. Yeah. And so there would be, 1,000 miles between each level. Or I'm sorry, 100 miles between each level. And then, each of these levels is made of a different gemstone, and I mean, the imagery is amazing. For me, that's kind of cool. I mean, to think that heaven is going to be a land that is beyond our imagination and its beauty and functionality. And, it tells us that there is no sun because the Lord himself is the source of the light, that we have, and all this kind of stuff will actually be in the presence of God. That's going to be the moment when truth is going to be revealed and it either is true or it's not, right? Because
now when you talk about that means that there is actually a confined space. It's a big space, but it's still a confined space. And you, as we know about any box, no matter how big the box is, you can only fit so many things or people in it.
Well, the other thing that's really interesting is that in John's Revelation, he sees heaven like a bride. It's beautiful and radiant and everything else coming down out of heaven and resting on the earth. And it actually says that people can come and go from this city. So it's almost like this big massive city, and people can come and go. That's what the gates
could there
are.
Kind of be. I mean, it fits our general model of the United States or any world or any country. There's cities here, and then you can go to another city. Will there be? Is there more than one block?
It doesn't say that. I think that this will be kind of the center of everything. And it'll be, of course, I mean, if you could imagine.
Well, you can't because
a city that big.
You can't because the only thing that you can imagine is what you see.
Sure.
We see. Everything that we see in our imagination is what is put into, what that final thought of it would be.
Yeah. And is that heaven actually coming down and sitting on Earth, terra firma, or is it, a lot of those kinds of things, it's hard to really make a solid connection to. So I can't say that's exactly what's going to happen, but the image is that it does. It comes down and sits. And imagine a city that big.
If that's the case and it's actually sitting on the Earth, then that would mean it's probably like in a different dimension. Because we can't see it. It's not there. We probably walk through it every day and travel through it, but don't know because it.
And that could be the portal or the gateway into the other dimension, into the dimension where God is, the spiritual dimension, where we could experience it in very real and tangible ways.
When the curtain when the curtain moves.
Yeah, when the curtain's pulled back, what's it gonna?
Yeah.
So for that reason, there's a lot of it definitely piques the imagination, and it's kind of fun to do that, but also a little bit scary.
I feel sorry for those that don't have imaginations, though.
Yeah,
because there are people that can read words, but it doesn't turn into visual. It doesn't process visually in their head.
Yeah.
So here's the thing that excites me the most about heaven, is that while it's supposed to be beautiful and sparkly and amazing, I mean, wealth that we can't even begin to imagine, what it does say about heaven is that there will be no more tears, that sin will be done away with,
sadness,
fear, anger, all of these things that make life suck. I've often thought about the fact that the only reason I want to be rich is because I want to have control over those kinds of things. Right. At the end of the day, if I was like super happy with life, satisfied, content, everything was at peace, I was filled with joy, and why would I need money? I don't even need money at that point, right? Mm-hmm. The problem is that we live in a really dark world where there is a lot of depression, anger, violence, betrayal, all of these negative, dark things. And because of that, we do know that money does buy us things that give us a little bit of a reprieve from that, right?
I don't think there's any way to actually go through life without spending any money, because even if you have a rural plot of land and you are coming up with all your own food, you're self-sufficient, somebody's going to charge you property taxes in the United States for it.
Yeah.
So you have to have money to, you can't go, at least in the United States, you certainly can't survive as an adult without having some money.
But that's part of the darkness that I'm talking about. The fact that somebody else is out to charge you for this and for
everything.
That. I mean, imagine if we lived in a place where God owns everything and he doesn't charge us rent.
Yeah.
Right? He doesn't charge taxes. So every need is met. Every bit of evil has been done away with. And to me, that's what I'm looking forward to. I'm looking forward to living in a world that is void of evil.
Yeah.
And
the real utopia.
Yeah.
The one that some strive for here on our worldly days, and they don't know that you will never get it. There's no such thing as a utopia on Earth.
Yeah.
Unless it is in a different dimension, and it is here, we can't see it or touch it.
There's not enough money to buy that utopia. And I mean, ask somebody who's absolutely wealthy. We think, well, see, when you get to that point, then, life is different. Life is better. Oh, no, there's a whole different realm of evil.
Yeah. I know a lot of people.
Everybody wants your money.
Yeah. A lot of people, a lot of money. And what I would have to say is they don't seem any particularly, I have a hard time, particularly. Wow.
Particularly.
Yes. And I'm not going to try to say it again, but, that they're not seem to be any happier than anybody else.
Well, it's kind of like
maybe there's some kind of a stress you don't have when you're not worried about your bills or losing your house, but they don't seem any happier.
Yeah, it's kind of like trying to figure out the universe, right? Every time you peel back a layer, there's something behind it.
Yeah,
it's the same way with money or even any pursuit of happiness, right? You finally reach a certain level and you find out, man, there's another layer of dissatisfaction, frustration, disappointment, whatever. There's one more thing. And that's, to me, why this world will never satisfy. That's one of the main, I guess, messages of Scripture, is that because this world, this realm is broken by sin, that we're never going to reach that point.
Yeah.
The hope is and the hope that Jesus shared is that death in this world, or a transition from this world, a resurrection into the spiritual realm, and a transition into the spirit is the only hope we have for something different.
Yeah.
Is that going to fix it all? I don't know. Jesus says it will.
Yeah.
And looking at the way he lived life, died, rose again, the things he taught, he's the best hope I've got.
Yeah. Well, and it goes back to that happiness comes from within.
Mm-hmm.
It is not something that is outwardly brought to you, and bringing possessions, bringing things to you. They'll buy you a bit of, okay, that's great. This is awesome. I really enjoy this, but that fades.
Do you know the Lord's Prayer? Do you remember that from your youth?
Yes.
Yep. Our Father who art in heaven.
Hallowed be thy name. Yeah.
Thy kingdom come.
Thy will be done.
Thy will be done.
On earth as it is in heaven.
So God's kingdom is a spiritual realm.
Yeah.
It's not a physical realm. It's a spiritual realm. It has implications for the physical realm.
Yeah.
But it's a spiritual realm. And so a huge part of what Jesus taught us is that God wants to bring his kingdom into our world. And how does he do that? Through spiritual beings, human beings, people, right? We have a soul. We are a soul. And so what Jesus taught, as a matter of fact, after his baptism, it says he began to teach the kingdom of heaven is near.
Yeah.
Prepare yourselves, right? Get right with God, because the kingdom of heaven is near. In other words, God wants to bring his kingdom into our lives and through us into the world.
Okay. I'm going to ask you a quick question here. I know Amanda's got to go. Do you have to get out of here? I mean, you can stay as long as you want, but if you've got to go ahead and take off. But I'm going to ask a question here about, since you brought up the Lord's Prayer.
Yeah.
And I'm going to ask this question. When I grew up, Hope Church, South Haven, Michigan, it was forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors.
Yep.
Now, I've been to a lot of other churches, and I think maybe even Hope Church has changed, and it's to forgive our trespasses as we forgive those that trespass against us. Why trespass and debts are way two different things?
Not really, because when somebody trespasses against us, when somebody oversteps the bounds and abuses us, takes advantage of us, or does something against us, they incur a debt, right? You owe me. So I think it's a matter of interpretation. I don't think it's a change in the whole idea.
Okay.
And really, I mean, isn't that what forgiveness and unforgiveness is all about?
Yeah, I do believe. On that note, I think we'll do a little shorter podcast here. I think that was really good stuff.
Wrap it up.
We went a bit deeper than maybe we talked about doing. We wanted to give a little overview of Revelations, because I think what a great time to start going a little deeper into that book.
Sure.
But how many pages is that old first chapter? Is it a long one?
The first chapter, no.
Okay, because it'll gauge how long I have to wait. Because I could do, if I just the first chapter, I could probably get that read by next week.
You can find the ones that are like on an Audible.
Well, the first three chapters they kind of go together. So try to read the first 3 chapters.
If I read the first 3 for next week, maybe, or do we want to wait a couple weeks?
That's like 12 or 13 minutes. You can get through 3 chapters quick.
You can do it.
Let's do that, and let's plan on our next week's podcast that we do with you. Let's explore those first 3 chapters. So,
all right,
yeah. Amanda Jones, thank you for staying out the whole time. I know you've got to get going. A Milan Bittenbender. And I am your host, Rob Byrds. It's been awesome doing this. Please like, share, tell all your friends about us. We like doing what we're doing. And if you can make a comment somewhere, wherever you're listening onto the podcast, and we'll try to respond to it. That helps us grow. That gets us in the algorithm. I think we're doing some pretty interesting stuff. The conspiracy stuff is great. The delving into the Bible and spirituality and religion and all that is awesome. And some of the local and national politics too. So we're having a great time, and we hope that you're enjoying us. And please tell all your friends about us, like, share, and subscribe. Till next time, this is All the Things They Don't Want You to Talk About. You can find all of our episodes at tabootalkback.com. Until next time. All the Things They Don't Want You to Talk About podcast is part of the Rob Byrd Moondog Podcast Network. Go to tabootalkback.com for more information. Copyright 2024.